Hey folks, welcome back. Today we're going to do something a little different. Let's get the car driving, and that's going to free me up to go ahead and tell a little story. So, first of all, shout out to Levi over at his channel, Tip You in the App. Levi is an Uber driver over in the Syracuse area, roughly 2.5 hours from where I am in the Albany, New York market. And he did a video recently. After you watch this video, I'll link to his. Go watch that video where he happened to be talking about his creative process for coming up with social media posts and writing and whatnot. And it was actually quite interesting. I definitely learned a few things. So thank you, Levi. Um, but what he used as a vehicle, so to speak, to no pun intended, uh, to talk about his creative process was a recent ride he had given as an Uber driver. And the quick version goes something like this. He picked up a lady at the Syracuse airport. He gave her a very nice Uber ride. He said it was roughly an hour. They had great conversation along the way. Of course, like any good Uber driver, he's going over and above. He's helping her with bags. They get to the destination, and it's a snow-covered driveway that hasn't been plowed. There's remarks about, oh, I can just drag my bags up. And of course, he says, no, I'll drive you up through the snow. He does, drops her off. There's a conversation at the end where the lady says, hey, I'm in a few days, I'm going to need a ride back to the airport. Would you be able to help me out with a ride? I think Levi and I have a lot in common, not just having a similar car. He also drives a Tesla Model Y, but we have similar outlook on giving private rides. And generally, the answer is no. In this case, though, he made a slight exception where he at least gave her his phone number and said, the Uber reservation system works great. You should be able to get a ride that way. But if you have trouble, here's my number. Give me a call and we'll figure something out. Sure enough, a few days goes by. This lady calls him or texts him and says, hey, I'm looking for a ride back to the airport. According to Levi, he gives her some kind of a price. Doesn't indicate what that is. That's not important. But somewhere along the line, the lady also, the passenger, says, oh, well, I do have my reservation through Uber all set. One way or another, she was going to go with that. Well, Levi is he's fortunate in that he gets a lot of reservations. I get some. I know a lot of drivers who get a lot of reservations. I know drivers who get none at all. I'm kind of in the middle. I get a few a week, or I get more than a few a week offered, but some of them are either way too short or too far away that I don't want to do. But in fairness, I have been getting more reservations in the last couple months than I had previously, which I'm excited about. So anyway, he goes back through his reservations. Sure enough, he has a reservation to pick up this same passenger, unbeknownst to him at the time, and maybe apparently unbeknownst to her. I was pretty sure that an Uber reservation, you see the name of the person already who's going to pick you up. Maybe they don't see that name until roughly an hour or half hour before. I think that might be the case. So unbeknownst to both of them at the time, he already had the reservation to pick her up. The catch is he's stewing about the fact that as nice as that original first ride went, the passenger never tipped him. And I get it. I understand he's miffed. I'm fortunate that I do get a lot of good tips. And there are times where I've given rides to people, especially longer rides, where you really get along. There's great conversation. It's just going swimmingly. And you're positive that when the ride is over, you're going to get a $10, $15, $20, maybe more of a tip. And sometimes that tip doesn't come through. And you're like, wow, I never would have pegged that person as not tipping, especially considering, how great the experience was. So Levi is stewing about this, and I get it. And he ends up canceling the follow-up reservation with the same passenger. Partly, I guess, because he didn't want to get into a whole tipping thing with her. I guess he would have felt compelled to, go ahead and bring up the situation. And that's taboo, of course. But he wouldn't have been able to control. I don't want to speak for him, but he gave his thoughts there, and you can watch the video. That triggered a story that I had last week. Actually, it was a week ago today. And I gave a ride to a passenger, a very nice lady. I picked her up at the Albany airport. This is a similar situation, but kind of the reverse. So let me go through it here. I picked her up at the Albany airport. Actually, and there were the normal pleasantries at the beginning of the ride. Of course, I helped put her bags into the car, and there were pleasantries, talking about the weather, that kind of thing at the beginning of the ride. But then the conversation stopped, and she kind of went quiet, and that's perfectly fine. That's part of being a good Uber driver, is you read the room, you read the car. If the passenger wants to talk, I'm happy to talk. If they're not, and I don't know what she was doing. She might have been on her phone. She might have been just staring out the window or lost in her thoughts. I'm not really sure, but I wasn't about to, interject. So it's a roughly half-hour ride up to Saratoga. And we get to the destination is a hotel, a very, very upscale hotel in Saratoga. This is the kind of hotel where rooms start around $400, $300 or $400. You can't get anything cheaper than that. And so where this hotel happens to be, it's right on the main drag of Broadway in Saratoga Springs. And it happens to be on the other side of the road of the highway from the way you approach it coming up from the south. So even though it's been quiet all the way up until we get there, we're about a half hour away from the hotel. And I say to her, if you don't mind, I'm going to circle around the block here. That'll put the entrance to the hotel directly on your right-hand side of the car so that you don't have to cross 4 lanes of traffic in order to get over to the hotel. She said, oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. And so now that was kind of an opening. And she also said something about, oh, that's a cute building. She was admiring some of the architecture. It's a beautiful downtown. And I said, oh, yeah. I said, have you ever been to downtown, or, have you ever been to Saratoga before? And she said, no. And so that was a little bit of an opening. I explained to her that it really is a beautiful town. It's a college town. A lot of nice shopping and cafes and whatnot in the whole downtown. And I told her when her hotel is right in the heart of it. If she walks out the hotel door, she can go 3 or 4 blocks to the left. She can go 3 or 4 blocks to the right. And there's tons of shopping and cafes and restaurants and all kinds of stuff. So she's like, oh, that's great. So by this time, this short little conversation, I've now circled around to the hotel. It's now on her right-hand side. She's sitting in the back right seat of the car. She gets out. I give her her bags. Have a great stay. Thank you very much. And that was it. 5 minutes later, I get a very nice tip from her. Let's do everything in round numbers here. If it was a $30 ride, she gave me an $18 tip, which, that's what, 60% right there. As far as, it's not 60% of what she paid, obviously, for the ride, but it is, as far as what I got paid for the ride, that's a 60% tip. I don't care who you are, that's a great tip. So that was a late morning ride. I don't know, 11 o'clock or so in the morning. A few hours later, fast forward, I'm back at the airport, ready to take another ride. I get an Uber reservation request for what I can only believe is this same person. What led me to believe that was her name had a very unique spelling. I'm going to change the name here to protect the innocent. Let's say her name was Stephanie with a Y at the end. And, something very unique like that. Well, 3 hours later, I get a reservation request for Stephanie with a Y, picking up just 1 block away from where I dropped her off and bringing that person back to the airport. And it again paid very well. My first thought was, wow, if this is the same person, and it almost has to be, here's another good paying ride for later on this afternoon. She gave me a great tip earlier. Maybe she'd give me a really great tip again. But then I remembered our conversation. What little bit about the conversation we did have, is as pleasant as it was, at no time did she mention why she was in town. And I couldn't really tell from the context clues either. She didn't have like a briefcase or anything with her, so I couldn't tell if it was like a business trip or personal. She just had one small carry-on bag with her. And so I got to thinking, I don't know why she's there. She did not mention how long she was going to be staying in Saratoga. And so in my time before I either accepted or declined that reservation, these thoughts were running through my mind like, okay, I don't know why she's there. It's kind of an unexpected, pairing that I might have her in the car again. What I was afraid of was, and this is where it's similar to Levi, of an awkward conversation, although this would have been awkward where what I was afraid of is I had like Jerry Springer type things going through my mind. Was she here to serve divorce papers to her ex-husband? Did she come to visit her boyfriend and he found out that he was cheating, and now she's leaving? I had all these worst case scenarios going through my mind, and I thought, if any of this is at all remotely true, it would have been kind of awkward to have her in the car again without expecting it, and then have this awkward, almost where she either has to explain why she was here for only a few hours and then leaving again, or if she didn't, again, that would just kind of be awkward about, not knowing why she came and why she's leaving. So against my maybe better intuition, I declined that reservation. Call me crazy. I know I probably gave up a good paying ride and maybe even a sure thing for a tip. But that's an example where, by the way, the car's doing really good through this intersection. It got over into the left lane perfectly, which is great because it's this left lane that now continues up straight. So I have had the same person in the car many times. Not this person, but I've had occasions where I've had a passenger in the car and then even unexpectedly had them again. And none of those thoughts went through my mind, maybe because I knew why I had taken that person to a hotel or to an Airbnb or whatever I was doing. The fact that she was a little guarded about her reason for traveling and why she was here made me a little leery about picking her up again so soon after having dropped her off just to take her back to the airport, that I decided, you know what, I don't want that uncomfortableness. Ironically, the fact that not only did she give me a good tip, maybe she'd feel obligated that she'd have to give me a good tip again. I wouldn't want her to feel that obligation. Of course, I would gladly accept it, but but also it's the uncomfortableness of I didn't want her to have to explain or us to have an uncomfortable silence for her not explaining her reason for traveling here and staying for only a few hours and leaving. So, yeah, have any of you ever experienced anything like that? I'm curious if any Uber drivers have declined a ride with a passenger where you otherwise had a good experience. And in this case, like I say, she gave me a great tip. Um, but believe it or not, that tip is actually a small part of why I declined a future ride with her, believe it or not. Um, I just didn't want that uncomfortableness. Anyway, that's the story I have for you today. Thank you to Levi. Shout out to him. Tip you in the app. I do watch his videos, and I'll link to his channel and video in the description. Thanks a lot. See you on the next one. Keep tripping. Bye bye.